You sat over the textbook until 2 o'clock in the morning, eyes red, head heavy as a stone. You reread the exact same page 7 times and still don't understand if anything at all settled inside. The exam is in the morning, and you lie in the dark with a single thought. Just don't forget. Just don't forget. Just don't forget. And then morning comes. You sit down in front of the paper and silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Right where the knowledge should be. Everything you studied evaporated, like it was never there, like the night never existed. You walk out of the classroom feeling like your brain betrayed you. Stop. Your brain didn't betray you. The method betrayed you. That exact method they taught you since the first grade. Read, reread, highlight, cram, repeat until you're blue in the face. That isn't learning. That's violence against your nervous system, and it doesn't work. It never worked. It's just that nobody told you this out loud. But now, I'm going to tell you something that will change the way you learn. Not next week, not starting Monday, but literally right after you finish listening to this. Over in Japan, regular grade school kids, not geniuses, not prodigies, learn 2,000 incredibly complex kanji characters, 2,000, and they remember them for life. Not just until the test, for life. When I first heard that number, I figured it had to be some kind of mysticism, a special mindset, genetics, a cultural code out of reach for the rest of us. I was wrong. There is no mysticism. There is a system. 5 concrete principles the Japanese built into their learning process that work with your brain, not against it. Principles rooted in samurai philosophy, in a centuries-old tradition of mastery, in an understanding of how human memory is wired on the deepest level. Today, I'm going to break down each of them in detail, honestly, with examples, stories, and real practice. Not a 5-minute summary, but a real conversation about how your brain operates and why you are so much smarter than you think. Let's go. First, the most important thing you need to understand about memory, the thing without which nothing else makes sense. Your brain is not a storage unit. It doesn't work like a hard drive where you save a file and just find it sitting there later. Your brain is a living web of connections, and it operates on one ironclad law discovered by the German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus back in the 19th century. A law most people still ignore. It's called the forgetting curve, and it is ruthless. 20 minutes after you learn something, you've already forgotten 40% of it. After an hour, 56%. After a day, 70%. After a week without review, 80%. After a month, almost everything. That isn't your weakness, it's biology. The brain receives thousands of pieces of information every single day. If it kept everything, it would short circuit. So it constantly sorts. This is important, this isn't. If you don't give it the signal, this matters, keep it. It dumps the information like trash. Cramming is an attempt to cheat this system with brute force. You pump the information in over and over, hoping it somehow sticks. Sometimes it works for one day, for one final, and then that's it. A blank slate. The Japanese took a different path. They didn't fight the forgetting curve. They learned how to use it. And that is the key difference between someone who learns and forgets and someone who learns and owns. The first principle is called Musha Shugyo, and it didn't come from a psychology textbook. It came from the training grounds of medieval samurai. Listen to this story. In feudal Japan, a young warrior didn't become a samurai just because he trained next to his teacher for a long time. At a certain point, the teacher would do one simple thing. He sent the student out on a journey alone, without a mentor, without hints, without the ability to ask what the right move was. This was Musha Shugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. You were thrown into real situations where your life depended on whether you could pull everything you'd been taught out of your memory. On your own, without a crutch, without peeking. And here is the paradox that completely flipped my understanding of learning. It is exactly in that moment, when it's hard, when you don't know the answer, when your brain is strained to the absolute limit trying to remember, that is the exact moment true learning happens. Not when you read, not when you highlight, not when you stare at the right answer, but when you agonizingly try to pull the information from the depths and finally find it. Neuroscientists call this the testing effect, or retrieval practice, and it's one of the most powerful discoveries in the science of learning over the last 50 years. When you recall something, not read it, not look at it, but actively recall it, you are literally carving a neural pathway in your brain. The more often you walk it, the wider it gets, the easier it is to travel the next time. Passive reading is like looking at a map of a road. You see the path, but you aren't walking it. And in the crucial moment at the exam, during a job interview in real life, you stand there frozen because your feet don't know the road. How does this look in practice? You read a paragraph, close the book, grab a blank sheet of paper, and write down everything you remember. No hints, no peeking, just whatever surfaces in your mind. The first few times, it's going to hurt. You'll write 3 lines instead of 3 pages. You'll get mad. You'll feel like you don't know anything. That's totally normal. That is the work. That's the exact struggle your brain later converts into long-term memory. After you write it down, open the book and check. See what you missed. Not to beat yourself up, but to know exactly where to point your attention next time. Studies show that students who use this method, instead of just rereading, remember the material twice as well. Not 10% better, twice as well. A samurai didn't become a master by staring at his sword. He became a master by holding it in his hands over and over until the movement became a part of him. Your knowledge is that exact same sword. Stop staring at it. Start working with it. The second principle is the one people underestimate the most because it sounds too simple. It's called Kaizen. And if you've heard this word before, forget whatever you thought it meant, because most people understand Kaizen as just improving by 1% a day. That's true, but it's only the surface. The depth is much more interesting. The story of Kaizen doesn't start in the boardrooms of Toyota and Honda, where the concept became a business legend. It starts much earlier in Japanese dojos, artisan workshops, and tea houses, where a master spent years refining one single movement, one gesture, one skill, before ever moving on to the next. The Japanese noticed something crucial about the human brain. It isn't afraid of small steps. It's terrified of big ones. When you look at a massive volume of material, 200 pages of a textbook, a whole semester's syllabus, a new language with all its grammar and vocabulary, the brain goes into defense mode. It's called analysis paralysis. The task feels so massive that it's just easier not to start at all. You know the feeling. You open the book, and instead of reading, you start flipping pages thinking, man, how am I ever going to finish this? Then you close it and go scroll on your phone. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain got spooked by the scale of it. Kaizen is a trick on the brain, a smart, elegant trick. You don't tell yourself, I'm going to learn this entire textbook. You tell yourself, I'm going to learn this one paragraph completely so well that I can explain it out loud right now. One paragraph, not a chapter, not a section, just a paragraph. And you know what? The brain agrees, because it isn't scary, it's tiny, it's doable. And when you pull it off, you get a little hit of dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter. The brain says, okay, that wasn't so bad. We can do a bit more. And you read the next paragraph. This is exactly how the Kumon system works, the Japanese educational method that grew out of Kaizen and became one of the most successful learning programs in the world. In Kumon centers, kids start with material they already know for an absolute fact, not with what they need to learn, but with what they can already do. Why? To build momentum, to let the brain taste success and actually want to keep going. Then the difficulty ramps up, but so slowly, so gradually, that the brain barely even registers the shift. Every single step is just 1 tiny % harder than the last. And a year later, after a year of daily micro steps, that kid is solving math problems their peers think are impossible. The math is simple and devastating at the same time. Getting 1% better every day isn't a 365% increase over a year. It makes you 37 times better, because improvements compound like interest in a bank account. Every step builds on the one before it. But there's a trap here, and almost nobody talks about it. Kaizen only works if you actually stay small. Most people hear about small steps and end up taking steps that are actually medium. They think, all right, I'll just study 10 pages instead of 50. That isn't Kaizen. That's just a slightly smaller dose of cramming. True Kaizen is when the step is so small it almost feels ridiculous. 3 new vocabulary words, 1 paragraph of theory, 1 single formula understood entirely down to its bedrock, not just scribbled in a notebook. A calligraphy master in Japan might spend an entire month working on 1 single character. 1 character, 1 month. His students would laugh, then they'd look at his work and go completely silent. The third principle is the most counterintuitive one, and that's exactly why it's so powerful. Picture a garden. You plant a seed, and now every day you dump a whole bucket of water on it. The whole bucket, all at once. What's going to happen? The seed will drown. The roots will rot. The plant will die not from a lack of care, but from way too much of it at the wrong time. Memory works the exact same way. You can study something for 7 hours straight and remember less than if you studied that same material in 7 short sessions spread out over time. This is called spaced repetition, and it is easily the most potent weapon in a Japanese student's arsenal. Here is why it works on a neurobiological level. When you review something right after learning it, the brain doesn't break a sweat. The information is fresh. The connections are active. There's basically 0 effort involved. And where there is no effort, there is no reinforcement. But when you wait, when you let the information start to fade, and then go back to it at the precise moment it's right on the edge of slipping away, your brain is forced to work. It rebuilds the connection that was starting to get weak. And every time it does that, the connection gets thicker, stronger, deeper. The Japanese found this principle intuitively through the tradition of keiko, a repeating practice spaced out over time. A martial arts master didn't drill 1 throw 100 times in a single day. He drilled it 10 times today, 10 times in 3 days, and 10 times a week later. The body remembered it differently, deeper, forever. Here is a concrete schedule I tested on myself, and it actually works. On day 1, you study the material. That same evening, 5 minutes of review. Not rereading, but reviewing, using that first principle. Close the book, recall it, write it down. On day 3, do it again for 10 minutes. On day 7, another 15 minutes. On day 21, the final review. After this cycle, the material moves into your long-term memory. Not for a month, for years, for decades. The neural pathway turns into a highway.